session-related items tonight.
Mayor, just going on record, I have a meeting at 8 o'clock, so I will be leaving at 8.
Okay? Seeing none, we'll move right on with the discussion. Discussion on changes for the special event and use of public funds. City Manager, Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, as council recalled, you instructed staff to come up with some recommendations for charging for special events and emphasis on keeping it simple and keeping it reasonable. So Chief Kozel and DPW Director McCool and I met, and we've come up with, we think, is a formula that meets what you wanted us to accomplish. So we broke it down into parades and events. And for parades, if it's a homecoming parade, there'd be no cost. And talking with both Jeff and Tim, they said that the amount that the city expends on those events are minimal, and it's all handled with on-duty people and no complications. So that's where we came up with a no cost. Parades on days that occur on days that allow for expenditures of public funds, there would be no charge because that is allowed by statute. And then other parades would be $100. And under events, events that occur on days that allow for expenditure of public funds, no charge. Nonprofit events would be $100 per day, and that would be events that don't occur on days that we're allowed to expend public dollars. And then finally, if there was a for-profit event, then they would be charged the true cost of city services. So that's what we came up with, and we'd like some feedback from council.
Feedback.
I don't know, it sounds reasonable to me.
Have we had any for-profit that we could relate to?
Not since I've been here.
Okay.
I still believe that this kind of stuff is what, spend money to make money, to get people here, so.
Well, in my mind, it makes the community what it is.
Right.
And I think the way it's, actually, I was very impressed with the way it was written. I think it covers all the legal aspects that we were concerned about without overwhelming the event. And again, if there is for-profit events, then it would be appropriate to whatever the event
Right.
is, and they would be able to scale it. Again, if they're going to have a Woodstock reunion here in Manistee, then we would charge appropriately.
Well, if council's satisfied with this, then what I'll do is I'll put it in a council policy statement and bring it back to a future meeting for your approval.
I just wanted to say really quickly that I don't think there's any council member here that wants to charge for services. But I think we have to do our due diligence and be mindful of the taxpayer dollar when we're spending that money. And we need to pay attention to the municipal spending rules. And this is one way we can do that and hopefully make everybody happy.
All right, I will put that in a council policy statement form and bring it back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next, discussion with Manistee Area Public Schools on the pain pool operation and the blighted building on 6th Street. Manager.
Yes, I met with Superintendent Stoneman and financial director, is that correct? Howard Voss, and probably a month ago, and we talked about the pain pool, and we talked about the blighted building, and I offered them an opportunity to come to council and share with council where they are at with those two different subjects. I've asked Howard to kind of, for lack of better terms, give the council kind of a tutorial on the 10-year history of the pain pool and, you know, how it started, how we got here, maybe talk about some of the usage numbers, things of that nature. And then Superintendent Stoneman, I've just asked him to go through their efforts to try to take care of that blighted building. So I don't know if council has a preference on which one they would like to hear from first.
I don't have a preference. Who wants to be on the firing line first?
I will.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Yes, Superintendent Superintendent Stoneman, thank you, council, for allowing me to be here. There was a presentation that we're going to go through today. I apologize, I should have given you a heads up when I walked in. Looks like that's it. Okay, before we get started, the overall issue with the building, the board recognizes this as thank you, recognizes this building as a priority for the district, and as they reorganize their thoughts and efforts with me as the new superintendent, we decided that we needed an overall facility evaluation, but at the pinnacle of this issue and facilities, this building is at the top of that concern. And as if you've driven by lately in the last 6 months or so, we have put up a fence in the last year around the facility, and we've also cleared away all the brush around the foundation, so it's a visible foundation, so we can monitor that. And we've also, any broken windows, especially on the first floor, we've boarded them up and secured the building for safety and appearance. So when the boards go up, they're painted the consistent color for continuity. So we're doing our best to maintain the building's appearance and presence in the community, and also safety. And if I can get into the review and reflection component of this related to our overall facility process, may catch the council up to date of where we're at. And again, and when we speak and do this presentation, the pinnacle effort or the number one priority in the district is dealing with that building. But like I said, the due diligence of overall facility study was the directive from the board.
It's the bottom one, it's the lower one, there you go.
Okay, now this presentation has a number of slides. I will go through them quickly to respect your time. This information will also be located on our website, and I've given you some information where you can locate that information. And this is a presentation that we plan on going out to the community and sharing, and also holding some open forums in the district. So the review of our 20-year history, a reflection on the educational foundation of Manistee and prioritizing the needs of our community. The vision, pretty simple, that we've put together as the internal group at the school, and you can read, so I won't need to elaborate on that. The basis of the mission of it, or the vision or mission here, is a community-wide commitment to provide a stable educational foundation designed to support the needs of the students, families, and businesses in the community for generations to come. The visioning process that we started was in July 2016, and we brought Right Side Design on. We were working on our overall mission and our overall culture in our district. We conducted helped us 120 one-to-one stakeholder interviews with members of the public, local business leaders and parents, staff, and board of education. The creation of the district learning community made up with our internal group, assists in the development of the unified school district and vision and brand. We did a lot of student surveys, evaluate the internal brand educational initiatives. In August, we brought on Tower Pinkster and Chrisman. Tower Pinkster is an architectural firm, and Chrisman is a construction management firm. The contracted with them to conduct a facilities need assessment. March 2018, creation of a student safety advisory committee was a big move for us, and now we have a group of parents that meet monthly with the administration and 2 board members to discuss the overall safety in the school district. It's been a very productive group, and we, like I say, we meet monthly. We've moved a lot of things forward. Facilities and assessment was completed in September. In October, the facilities history and timeline compiled and presented to the stakeholders. And we've created the MAPS 2020. The MAPS 2020 initiative announced in internal stakeholder meetings and conducted. And now we are April and May, and we were the first group that we can kind of give an outside presentation to. View of the last 20 years. Here's a list of the buildings and their ages and the cost for those buildings. And the yellow arrows represent the facilities that are currently being used. As you can see, the price for those facilities and still being in use, the community has certainly got their money's worth out of some of these facilities. And you can see the high school built in 1967. And since '67, the only building or major construction was the high school on 12th Street. And just some milestones of the aquatic center, the Manistee track, and those indicate private or funds within the school district. It's just a little reflection on bond proposals, just so that there's clarity to this. First bond proposal that we have listed here, 1997. It was the first major bond election since '67 high school. And you can see the things that were part of that bond. It's listed in the gold boxes. That was 30 million and 30.5 million. You can see the election results for those for 1 and 2 proposal. And then in 1998, another proposal was presented for 30.8. And you can see the bond election results there. And then again in '99, the proposal won for just under 20 million, and that passed. But you see the X's on the items, and it shows what was not included in the bond language or that bond proposal. All the things that were taken out of the 30.8. And as you can see, the demolishing of the 27 high school was one of those things that was not part of the 1999 bond. Interesting, okay. Moving on, bond years, 2001, 2002, the football and soccer field was constructed, non-bond monies were used, general fund and PIL funds were used for that construction. And there in 2009, the Payne Aquatic Center, and those are 100% private funds. No school funds are spent on the construction. In the green box there, it says facility improvements. The bonds did not pass in prior, and so some things did not completed that were essential for the district. So 1.4 million was spent in 99-2000 on facilities, and additional 1.3 spent on facilities in 2003. All monies were spent from MAP's general fund for required building capital improvement, maintenance, and occupied buildings. I think it's important that we add this type of information to show that there are internal investments into these facilities that we may not know about or talk about. So I think it's important to list those. And in 2011, there was another bond proposal that also failed, and it has a link there from the yellow boxes, if you can follow that chart. And it was mainly on the aging elementary schools, the development of an overall master plan highlighted in modernization of the Kennedy, with demolition of the high school, site improvements for Jefferson, eliminate the use of Madison. And again, that did not pass, but it did include dealing with that building of the 1927 high school. Sinking fund was requested in 2012. It did not pass. 2012 schools reached out to the community and once again attempt to repair the roof of Kennedy Elementary as well as demolish the former high school building constructed. 1927 voters did not support that. It was a 0.95 mil for a sinking fund. Those school needs to continue and our operations need to protect our investments. $3 million was spent in 2012 for required building maintenance and upkeep in occupied building. Notable projects include the Kennedy Elementary roof, structural rehabilitation, $700,000 and $1.5 million energy performance upgrades as part of the Honeywell project. How that works is those savings and energy upgrades are used to support the roof and other maintenance to a building. So the savings and energy is turned around and used back into the building. The district has used a number of those energy contracts for helping to pay for some of the maintenance. Defining the priorities. So in the assessment, facility assessment, this is just a snapshot of, as you can see, 11 to 20 years, the dollar amounts that need to be addressed. 4 to 10 years in yellow, and 1 to 3 years are some priorities in spending for the overall facility assessment. And that's just information for the board and the community to see that we have ongoing expenses and needs for our facilities. Presentation of facility discussions. We've met with MAPS faculty and staff. We've conducted meetings with the internal support groups. That is our student safety committee, our parent-teacher associations, our boosters, the Board of Education. We've community stakeholder group meetings. Those groups that are tightly aligned with the schools. We'll also be having public forums, and community survey will be in the future. So far, when we've talked to the internal audience, these are the top 11 things, feedback that we're getting from the group. Safety is coming out in here, improved parking and pickup and drop off, safe entrance to the buildings, Voc Tech Makerspace. I think that's a need for our community. And again, this is from our internal staff and our parent association groups' feedback. 5 key focus areas: the 21st century learning environments, safety, early childhood learning, stewardship, and community. A little bit of a description of what 21st learning spaces are: creative learning environments with flexible spaces that provide diverse accommodations to optimize all forms of learning. As our buildings were built in the 50s and late 60s, the style of education has changed. And there's an accommodation for that style of teaching and learning that the spaces create challenges for, because they're very traditional. Just a couple examples of some 21st learning spaces. Safety. Establish a solid foundation of best practices that can be implemented through facility improvements, working with law enforcement support, community collaboration, school safety education programs, and policies and activities. We continue to, we've redone our emergency operation plans, and we've done from an outside source. The county is working with a safety committee led by our sheriff's department. And through this process, we've applied for several state police grants. Most recently, you may have read in the paper that we have a protective film added to the high school exterior windows. And we've just submitted another grant for the same grant, but a different cycle, for continued improvements in safety for our buildings. Here's an example picture of that. As you can see, the secure entrance, where you go in and directly into the office, and you do not have access to the building. You go into the office. There's restroom facilities, so no person would need to leave and go into the general building without being checked in or chaperoned. So that's what we're looking at. Another safety component is parent parking, parent loop, and bus loop. As you can see, all of just an example here, that the separation and the need of that. And we have those challenges at all of our schools. They're not necessarily designed for transportation. They're community schools designed for walk-up and neighborhood schools. So that is a big issue. Early childhood learning, supporting the youngest Chippewas to learn, grow, and play, and to work in individuals while getting ready for their K-12 experience. Extremely important, and the research shows what investments need to be made with our youngest children for them to be successful as they continue. Our value in that dollar spent with our youngest kids will pay us dividends. Here's an early childhood learning program, just a room for example. Facilities, maintenance, and stewardship, evaluating facility needs over the next 20 years. We will develop a sustainable plan for efficient use and maintenance of our physical assets. So when we're looking at this facility project, we're kind of giving you a reflection with the 2020 as the reflection of the last 20 years. We just looked at that. Now the other 20 in the 2020 is what are we going to do in the next 20 years? It seems that there's been a pattern of not looking out far enough into the future and having an idea and a plan related to what we need to do with our facilities over a long period of time. So we'll be getting feedback and meeting with groups like yourselves and getting some feedback and discussion related to having a long-term facility plan where we're not finding ourselves in deep holes with facility needs and forecasting our needs and communicating to our community about those needs. So it's not a surprise and it's not where did this come from kind of discussion, that it's foreseen. Okay, stewardship will remain our physical assets to support our educational goals. And stewardship, again, you see a picture of our facilities, and we've added the football field out of general fund and the track through fundraising and selling of some building and forestry. And the school district's done a very good job keeping the facilities that they have running and operable and investing in them as we go along also. Community impact, working collaboratively with community partners to provide a strong educational foundation. MAPS endeavors to deliver a legacy of positivity, respect, and belonging, and encourage all students to be a productive citizen. We feel that public schools in this community are a pillar to a strong community, and we would like to be respectful about that, but we also would like to make sure that we're supportive of each other on all the pillars in the community that make it important. We want to be partners. You know, community spaces are extremely important. Just to remind you that our facilities are used for MRA and other activities, and we recognize our responsibility in supporting the community with our facilities and how we can expand that in the future. It's just examples of some community spaces. Now, I didn't bring a card for each of you to fill out, and you may do this, or you may email me this. We're asking each group that we meet with to answer a few questions. So the feedback that we're looking for are in these 3 questions. Now, you'll have access to this presentation. I've given you a card. If you feel, I'm welcoming you to give me an email about what your thoughts or feelings on the presentation and maybe address a question or 2 that are here. I would really appreciate that. And we would add your feedback and information to our overall information, and that we'll be reporting back what new information and priorities that we're receiving as we move around the community talking to groups. Okay? Next steps, hold community forum and discuss in April and May. I've given you some information related to those forums and those dates. Continue external stakeholder group discussions. I think it's important that we just don't hold public forums. We need to go out to the community and talk to them and get this feedback. If we just hold meetings and ask people to come, I don't think that's respectful enough, that we need to go out to where the people are and ask for this feedback. So that's what we're doing. Again, we'll share updates as the information is collected. We'll use the feedback to create a MAPS 2020 vision for the future. So the next 20 years will be part of the feedback that we get. We need your voice. Ways you can help. Thank you. Again, I started off this presentation by stating that the board recognizes the importance of the plight, that's recognized in the plight of that building. As you can see in the bond history, that it's been a priority to be part of that ask for the community. And some of the bond or sinking fund requests were isolated just to a few items that included that building. So we'll continue our efforts, and we plan on working with the community in a broad sense and have these conversations. Do you have any questions?
Now, Mr. Stoneman, where are we at with that building and tearing it down?
Well, I think, as you can see, we've asked in the past for community support, so I anticipate that being asked again.
One of the things that I've heard, and I don't know if it's true or not, because you know how that goes,
Yep.
is that the school on Parkdale, when it was sold a few years ago for around $200,000, that money was supposed to go toward the demolition of this building. Can you elaborate on that and tell me if that's truthful or not, or what?
I was not here, but from the history that I do understand, maybe Howard can help too, that the board made a action item related to the use of those funds to support that track. And that,
And it is pretty much,
Yeah.
and I think.
I don't think
but I-
anyone changed their mind is what I'm saying, oh, we're gonna do this with it, no, we're gonna do this. I don't think that occurred.
I was at that meeting. I remember the night that happened, that the money was diverted. There was one member of your board that adamantly spoke against transferring that money to the track. He actually voted no for that. I thought at that time there was an account set up. Is there still an account set up? Was there ever an account set up to demolish that building?
For the use of demolishing the account for that building, I do not know. I think the action that night was to start a track account, is my, yeah.
Mr. Stoneman.
Yes, sir.
What would
Yeah.
it cost to get rid of that light building?
There's a elevator in that building
Yeah, I've
that
heard
is shared between the current building. So the cost of taking the building down, it's been abated, there's no asbestos in it. A lot of the casework has been sold out of there and been refurbished. So the cost of taking it down would be different because we have to relocate that elevator by law in that Kennedy building. So to take it down would make, I don't know what a new number would be for that, but and to relocate that, it would probably be less than $1 million, but more than $500,000 to $600,000, I'd imagine. But I don't know that for certain.
Is that elevator being used still?
Yeah, by obligation it is, yes. And it's right between the two buildings. The two buildings are connected, and there's an elevator. And one side of the door would have opened up into the old building, side of the door opens up into the new part. And they block that wall off to the old building. So it's operable in the Kennedy building, and it is used.
So let me tell you what I think I hear you saying.
Yes,
There really isn't any money set aside to tear this building down. And the only way it's gonna get tore down is if we have a millage is passed for this.
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we should be working through our community about working with solutions with our facility needs. Depending on the community's appetite and what desire this process goes, will determine what we do. So to say that it's not gonna get tore down unless it's voted on, I don't know if that's for sure. I think we'll work together and find out what the community would like to do to support the schools.
But right now, there's no funds currently to tear it down.
No funds have been procured for that purpose at this time.
You know, in Bear Lake, when they had the big fire, and they were, to tear that building down and get rid of all that was just, the price was just astronomical. In fact, they came to the Revenue Sharing Board wanting a lot of money. Then they found out that they could salvage the bricks, and a brick company came in and cut it to 1/3 of the cost. Have we looked at any brick companies to salvage those bricks or not?
Yeah, I've had some conversations with some developers in the area, and those conversations are continuing to expand from this point. So we're looking at every lead that we can chase down, and that kind of situation is one of them. Mick?
So, what happened to the Washington school property? Because I noticed it's not listed on here as any kind of a sale. And it was tore down, and I was wondering how that building got tore down and what funds were used for that.
That building was sold, and if it was, it's not included, that was an omission. The school district sold it to a developer. That developer had plans to develop it, and several years went by, nothing happened there. And they acquired, I think, maybe some brownfield money or some source of revenue that it was taken down. But it was the private.
But completely external from the school.
You know what they got for that building?
I do not have that.
Property?
I have 100, 200,000.
About the same as Kennedy? Yeah.
We're pushing the conversation forward. As a school board and school community, we recognize that this needs to be dealt with in part of our conversations. So we're trying to expedite these conversations and move forward and see where they go. But again, like I say, and reflection, it is a priority for our conversations.
Are there any avenues from the State Board of Education to find money for schools like this, for buildings that are in this kind of condition, to be able to assist with the demolition? I mean, imagine there had to have been schools in the Detroit area that were in similar circumstance that the city couldn't afford to tear down. So I'm just curious if maybe some venue through the State Board of Education to be able to find assistance.
Yeah, the State Board of Education has no money for disbursement in that way. And sometimes there's a legislative act that directly funds, like Detroit, to help them with their facilities. And I think there has been some sort of act in the past by legislation to support them taking that down. But I think there also may be some city money that was used to help bring those buildings down. I worked in the area for a while, and that's what I'm familiar with.
Any other questions? Comments?
Again, please use my email and send me what's on your mind or any other questions that you might have. And Howard will talk about the pool for you, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thad asked that I kind of go back and give a little bit of a history of the pool and how we got where we are. I know Ed and I were around, but I don't know how many of you were active with the city at that time. But it all started back in 2007 when the city and the school district were approached by Bill Payne. Bill and Marty had been contemplating a donation of a community pool to our city for years. And Bill recognized that a pool is a gift that keeps on taking. They're expensive to operate. So Bill had done a lot of research and looked into things, visited other communities to see how we could have a sustainable project. He was willing to donate millions of dollars for its construction, but wanted to feel confident that it was going to go forward, maintained, and with operating revenues. So in 2007, we held a joint meeting with City Council and the Manistee Area Public School Board. It was held in the auditorium at the high school. And there, both of those governmental entities were kind of brought up to speed on the project and the idea that in order for this to work, there would have to be an intergovernmental agreement where no entity could afford to have this asset for the community themselves. So we were going to have to work cooperatively to pool our resources to have something that would be a huge benefit to the community. And Mr. Payne was willing to write the check for it, but he needed assurances that we were going to take care of it going forward. So following that meeting in October of 2007, interlocal pool agreement was reached between the city and the school district. And that agreement outlined how we were going to care for and operate this facility going forward. And the agreement, it's a very wonderful gift for our community, but there were times where I was suggesting perhaps the parking lot next to the city hall was a good place for it. And Ed thought next to the high school was a better place to put it. So we, in the end, it was determined it was going to be built on school property, and the school therefore would take responsibility for maintaining the staffing, the insurance, the collection of membership fees, ongoing capital improvements all fell upon the school district. And the city's contribution would be an annual contribution of $40,000 a year. In exchange for the city's contribution of $40,000 a year, all of the residents of the city of Manistee pay only 50% of what other people pay to use the pool. So if someone's coming to use the pool for an afternoon of swimming, the fee is $6. If they're a city resident, they pay $3. If they want to have an annual membership, it's $180. For a city resident, it's $90. That was the benefit to the city residents in exchange for supporting the pool through that $40,000 annual payment. The school's contribution is pretty much everything else that it takes to operate the pool. We started out with an annual contribution from the general fund of $80,000 a year. That eventually went up to and has continued to be $85,000 a year that we contribute to the operation of the pool. As I mentioned earlier, also capital improvements are the responsibility of the school district. And through those same vehicles that Ron mentioned, where we've done some energy guarantee bonding, we've borrowed monies at no cost to the taxpayers. But this summer, for example, we put $672,000 into the dehumidification units at the pool. So the districts made sizable annual contributions and then also, signed these capital improvements that were needed. So that's kind of the history of the contributions. The agreement also outlined and encouraged other municipalities to participate, and Filer has taken advantage of that. And that agreement with the city outlined the parameters of how much they would pay. And the basic formula is that we took the $40,000 that the city was paying, divided it by the population, and the 2000 census is what we had at that point, got a per resident figure, and then we multiplied it times Filer's population, and that's how we determined. So that they were paying the same per capita amount, and they also received the same benefit of a 50% discount. So that's how those numbers came to be, and that was the agreement at the time that we entered into it. And again, Mr. Payne, and not to exclude Mr. and Mrs. Marty Payne also, very generous contribution, but they wanted us to work together so that we could afford to keep this going. The pool has been, I think you'll agree, is a valuable asset for our community. We have paid lifeguards that are employees of the school district, but we do rely on a volunteer group who actually are kind of greeters at the pool. They're in the reception area when you enter the pool. And they do their best to monitor, have people sign in and indicate when they're paying what municipality that they're from so we can track those things. But there are periods of time where there isn't a volunteer present or perhaps they miss somebody. But just in the last 5 years, we've had nearly 23,000 city residents stop in and sign their name at the volunteer booth on their way to swim. That's about 56% of the total people who've used it over the last 5 years. Let's see, I think I talked about, the other thing I wanted to mention is that the finances for the pool are maintained in a separate fund of the school district, and they're part of our annual audit. And our annual audit is posted as required by law on our website, so you can go back and look at the history of that. It's part of the audited financial statements that are posted online for the school district. The one thing that I did omit, another partner in the pool is the hospital. As Mr. Payne was trying to find a way to make this a viable going concern, he invited partnership with the pool, and he actually constructed a separate smaller therapy pool. We call it the worm pool. It's very popular with some of the older swimmers too. They enjoy that warmer water. But the hospital rents for $45,000 a year a certain number of hours of that therapy pool. And then when they're not using it, it's available to just general citizens to use. Therapy people aren't included in the numbers I gave you. They don't sign in. They're there with the hospital receiving treatment. So that's kind of the overview of it. I don't know if you have specific questions. I do my best to answer them. Yes?
How late is the pool open and how many days a week is it open?
Corey, we're open now 7 days a week, right? We started up.
7 days a week.
We started 6 and then expanded it to 7.
And then how late in the evening are you open?
We're open until 8 o'clock. We clear the building by 8:30.
Okay.
On Saturday it's 4, Sunday it's 5.
Some of my research, I read about Friends of the Pain Pool.
Yes.
Is that still active? Whatever happened? What's going on with that?
There's a group of people, and it kind of comes out of that volunteer group that I mentioned, that actually man the desk when you enter into the pool. And those folks are definitely fans and friends of the pool. They've dug into their own pockets and raised a little money to help produce brochures advertising the pool, which I'll leave with Thad to disperse to you. But they're a group of pro-pool people who appreciate the asset and encourage us to take care of it. And
Are they actively trying to raise money for the pool or support the pool, or?
I think that there's been times when a few members have made a donation, to help try to get, I know there was a push that in the summertime to let more visitors know about the pool. So there was some type of publication, and I think one of those members may have written a check for part of that.
Do you have another topic? Students, do you know how many students from the city attend school at Miss? Do we know? And how the potential use of that pool by the students of the city of Manistee?
Our demographic data isn't sorted that way, but I can go sort it. I don't know of our enrollment, what percentage of residents, certainly a good percentage of it.
Yeah, I think the
can get
number is
that.
quite high, and it would support spending the money for the pool. Our use of that, that would be a really good number to know.
Okay.
Also, the number for me would be, I know my wife pays a membership, but how many memberships do we have? What type of memberships, that type of thing?
Okay.
From the city.
Yes. Yep.
We have that data.
Yep.
Yeah,
We
that would
will-
be really good information to have, and
Okay.
for me.
Do we verify the addresses when people come in and say, I live in the city, or do we just take it for their word?
Some volunteers are more aggressive than others. Some may take their word for it and ask somebody afterwards, and then if they find out, they won't take their word again. Other people are more probing, when someone
My wife
comes
had
in.
to show her driver's license.
Yep, it really depends on some volunteers, we ask that they verify. Some people are uncomfortable, and they may not. I can't say with absolute assurance that everyone does.
Howard, are we trying to get the other townships to come involved in this?
Yeah, we're always interested in other entities. There's been, so far it's just been the city and Filer, and that's the main group of swimmers. When we look at those other municipalities that have pretty low usage, and they just have not been willing to support it because the formula for the number of swimmers that they have, whereas you have 23,000 people, there's some townships that have 200 people. So the formula is the formula, and that's part of the agreement, so we can't alter it based on usage. It's based on how many residents there are, so that may be prohibitive for some of them. But we've been in conversations, but so far, just the Filer has participated. At one time, Stronach Township did, but it was just, they didn't have the usage. An interesting number that came out when our tech director ran the numbers and compiled them is the number of people who visit the pool who are from further out county and have kind of made it part of their trip to Manistee to swim and to shop and to have lunch. And so that was kind of interesting to see. That was never an aspect of the pool that I had considered, that it was kind of a part of people's, having a reason to come into town and conduct other business.
When I talk with people in the summertime and who are just here traveling or visiting, they've researched the community pretty well before they get here. And one of the things I hear a lot about is the fact that we have a pool and how unique that is. And pools aren't cheap, you're right. They cost a lot of money. They're kind of like a boat, big hole you throw money into.
Yes, they are.
But it does make the community unique.
It does, and on that note, when I was just looking around this afternoon, I noticed that probably one of the things those people that spoke to you see is if you Google us, we have a 4.6 star rating, which most of the time people get online to complain about stuff, not to compliment you. So I was pleased to see that there were 50 people who had taken the time to comment on the pool, and it was 4.6 out of 5 people with favorable ratings.
I would be interested in seeing that agreement that was made in 2007,
Okay.
if we can get a copy to council.
I got a couple of questions.
Sure.
One of them is the $40,000 that was developed as a cost in 2007 still reasonable to expect in 2019? And for the school to still be able to maintain the pool at the same levels as it is?
We have not discussed any types of increase. As I mentioned, our contribution has gone up slightly over that same period of time. We're open for discussion, especially that type, but.
Well, again, I just looked at, just taking there's 6,000 residents here about in Manistee. So you divide that by the 40,000, it's $6 a person per
Yep.
year.
Exactly.
I'm sure that doesn't cover the chlorine costs.
No, but again, through Mr. Payne's vision, we do have other sources of revenue through other partnerships, the hospital, and memberships, about $18,000 a year in memberships, and then annual daily swims. So the pool has, over the 10 years or 9-10 years it's been going, has built up a little bit of fund equity. There's about $75,000 in that pool fund that we're going to need as the pool ages. And as has been mentioned by many of us, pools aren't inexpensive, so there's some other costs coming.
Things must be pretty tight because my wife keeps complaining about the temperature. She'd like the water a little warmer.
Corey said it was warmer today in the big pool.
And I've got one more question. You may not be able to answer, but if for whatever reason the city decided not to support the pool, what would be the impact?
Well, I don't know how to quantify that just standing here, but it would definitely be a negative impact and would result in it would just have to, by the nature of the cost, have a pretty significant scaling back in the hours it's available, because many of those costs are fixed. You're heating the pool, you're putting the chemicals in regardless of the number of hours it's open. So your variable costs are limited, so they would have to significantly shrink to absorb that.
So your only variable cost would be labor, correct?
Yes.
Would be lifeguards.
Yep.
So you have to cut hours in order to make up the difference.
Significantly.
Raise fees.
Or raise fees.
Do you have anything in the contract with increasing every so often the fees?
The agreement that was agreed to at the time had the fees set stable, but user fees can be revisited. The city has a voice in that. The way that the contract, the agreement reads, is that we'll work together to set fees so we could discuss an increase. But again, our focus has been trying to make sure it's a benefit for the community and that's utilized as much as we can. So we tried not to make it cost prohibitive.
You talk about the negativity of if we didn't supply the 40,000, it would really cause a negative impact on the pool, on the operation. I would go so far as to say it would cause a negative impact on the community as far as how we present ourselves and what we do for our citizens. So.
I appreciate that. I agree with you.
Do we make sure that all lifeguards are certified? Is that-
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, do we ever, fund it if someone wants to be a lifeguard? Do we have to, or they have to?
We have some of that in the past.
I mean, you also train lifeguards,
We
right?
train lifeguards and pick up the cost of the fingerprinting and some of the other things.
And do you manage the pool, Corey? So if anybody,
Right.
who, is in charge of actually like getting the rentals?
I am.
Are you?
We work with Beth, who as secretary, spends about a quarter of the time handling the birthday parties and people and stuff. Very good at it.
Yeah, so Corey oversees it, but the activities director at the high school is the contact for the consumer who's interested in utilizing it.
I do have a,
Oh, sure.
I'm really grateful that we have a community pool. In fact, anytime you can share services that are assets, I think it's a great thing. I used to belong to a group of people who walked regularly after work in the indoor track. I stopped doing that a few years ago, but this group came to me and they did mention to me that they were disappointed that they can't walk in the indoor track at night anymore. So that's why I was curious about the operational hours for the pool. I didn't know if there was any correlation, but I just want you to know that the indoor track was a big deal too.
Yes.
We haven't talked about it a lot.
No.
And it's hard for working people to get over there and walk during the day, obviously, so.
Well-
We're revisiting that for next school year to see if we can't have someone to accommodate or be supervising the area in the evening hours. So it's something that we're trying to work our budget to.
Okay, great, then, I'll let them know.
Thank you for the feedback.
Any other questions?
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your time.
Okay. Happy birthday.
Thanks.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Jim.
Thanks.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Thanks.
Should I have a poll?
Okay, the next thing on the agenda. Capital Improvement Plan, presentation. Mr. McCool is getting up.
Sometimes you draw the short straw.
Yep.
Tim gave him some of his time.
Oh, good, thank you, Tim. 2 minutes?
Right.
So the city manager, finance director, public safety director, and our engineer of record and I have all been working on this for several months. The way that we look at capital improvement, really the way that we've started to populate and make decisions on capital improvements is really through our asset management plans. Currently, the city has a street asset management plan, plans for our sanitary sewer system, our storm sewer system, the water system, and also our motor pool. So these are just examples of the cover sheets of those plans. Our water asset management, the storm asset management. I probably should have brought copies of this for the sanitary sewer. Those are like, what, 3-inch binders? Just a massive document with a lot of information in them. That was all paid for by the SAW grant that we received from MDEQ. And then we also have just an example of part of the spreadsheets that go into our motor pool fund, where we look at every detail from the vehicle number to the year purchased, make and model, where it's being used, who it's being used by, the estimated life, replacement costs, and so it gets pretty complex. The important thing about those asset management plans is that it helps us make data-driven decisions. It helps us to create discipline in how we're spending those funds and planning out in the future on how and when those assets need to be replaced and upgraded. It helps us, especially in the utilities and the streets, to cross-match needs so that we can put the money together to have the biggest impact on the community. It also provides opportunities for grant funds and matching. Two areas that we have not done such a robust forecasting for is our facilities and structures within the city, and then also all of our parking lots. So this is pretty small, but I wanted to show just how many facilities we actually own and operate. I think there's 43 on that slide, just in buildings and structures. When you look at parking areas and such, there's actually close to 50 different areas within the city and that are city-owned and maintained. We have started, but have not nearly completed an analysis of those two areas. And when we look at the buildings and structures, each one of those columns are areas of importance, and not every structure has items that such as electricity or HVAC. But what we are planning to do in the future is to assign each of those areas to various groups, and we're trying to keep it within city staff, our vendors of record, so our plumbing contractor of record, our electrical contractor of record, HVAC, that sort of thing, so that we can do evaluations on all of our facilities and populate this. And then we've actually started creating draft forms on how we can put that information together. And just like the school superintendent was talking about, forecasting out what the current condition is, when we're going to need to do preventative maintenance techniques, and then ultimately the capital improvements. It's very hard to see here, but we also just started, the engineers have been creating maps of the city, and it's tough to see, but outlined in black are the actual facilities, and in the orange, you can kind of see a little bit more here. In the orange are some of those parking facilities. The big question is, how do you fund those improvements? And do you want to go through that, Ed, or, okay.
So just a little bit of history. Back when the Great Recession hit, the city lost an incredible amount of taxable value, and that translates to revenue that we didn't have in the general fund. And a lot of these items, the buildings and the parking lots, are things that are paid for out of the general fund. So at about the same time, that's when we were able to better invest the oil and gas fund and start to generate more revenue off that on an annual basis for those capital improvements. And so that capital improvement fund really became a very important source of funding the types of things that Jeff's talking about, because there was just not the capacity in the general fund. In fact, we had to make significant cuts in the general fund. Currently, the amount of revenue that's generated in the capital improvement fund is about $380,000 to $400,000 per year, and that's based on the annual spending rule, and then that's allocated to this fund. The high levels of categories of things that we actually spend money on out of the capital improvement fund are general projects, parks projects, public safety projects, streets, buildings, including the Ramsdale Theater and beach houses, and then the marina. From 2007 to 2019, and 2007 is when we first created the capital improvement fund, we've spent a little over $5 million on different capital projects. And I want to give you an example of the broad range of projects that have been funded by this. It was used to build the Fifth Avenue Beach House. We've done a number of different fire station improvements, including some HVAC, including some flooring, including rehabilitating a wall in the fire station, a generator at the fire station. There's been a lot of work at the Ramsdale Theater, the HVAC project, as well as a new roof on the Ramsdale, and then it helped to partially fund the bathrooms that are downstairs now that didn't used to be there. We've done a lot of different parks projects, sprinklers, we rehabbed some tennis courts, we did some drainage repairs over at Duffy Park, and some other upgrades as well. Technology, we've bought servers out of that, and we'll continue to do that in the future. We installed a wireless network that connects the city buildings together. We did fiber optics to connect City Garage to City Hall to our water tower as the backbone for our network, and we've done some GIS work out of that. there's been a lot of money from the capital improvement fund that's gone towards streets. It basically pays for the bond that funded the First Street reconstruction, which was former council member Hornkohl's key project that he was shooting for, so we were able to get that done. There's also significant annual transfers to the street funds currently to fund street projects. We've done public safety items, the tasers, the generator here at City Hall, amongst others. There's been some money in the very early days of that went to help build up what we had was a Riverwalk maintenance fund. Those were cut out, but there has been money that has gone to that. And then there's also money currently going to support the notes and the bonds that we had to take out to support the marina building renovation. So the point of this slide is to say that the capital improvement fund has been used for a lot of different things, and it's funded a lot of different projects over the years. This chart reflects where the budget is for the current fiscal year. About 67% of the annual fund is spent on street improvements, about 19% for buildings, 11% for marina, 3% other. And the chart on the lower right shows that a good portion of that is new spending, mainly transfers to the street funds, and then there is a little bit of debt service support. There's the Ramsdell HVAC note that is still being paid for, and then also the $65,000 a year that goes to the marina to basically help them service their debt. This chart shows the last 5 years, actually 6 years, of the capital improvement fund by those basic categories that I mentioned on the first slide. So we've got the streets, general fund projects, buildings, public safety, parks, and marina. The two biggest takeaways from this are that the general projects, the public safety products, parks projects have pretty much been zeroed out. There really isn't much of that left anymore in the capital improvement fund. It's been replaced by basically money going to streets. We have reduced the amount that's been going to buildings because the one roof note on the Ramsdell Theater has been paid off, and it has not been funding other building projects except for the debt that's left for the HVAC on the Ramsdell. And you can see over that same time frame, there's been a lot of money that has gone into streets. So the one thing to keep in mind is moving forward, there's going to be more needs than this fund can fund because there just isn't enough money going into it. But if we're going to be proactive on managing our parking lots, there's going to be other building needs. There may be some general needs. We may want to take a look at, the priorities in this fund and where it's going to. That's particularly important, and you'll see this in the budget that's going to be presented. The revenue for streets is continuing to increase from the state, and we've been able to do a tremendous amount of leveraging on streets, or will be for the next couple of years. So streets are a very important priority, and we've been putting a lot of money into them, but there may be other priorities that are going to come up that need attention. And I'll give you an example for that. And a little sneak preview of the budget. This is something that we're proposing, but and Jeff can speak about it, but the electrical transformer over at City Garage, talk about that a little bit.
Well, the city garage was built in the early 1970s, so the facility's 50 years old. The electrical service that comes into the garage and the panels and breakers and such, they're 50 years old. Several years ago, we talked with our electrician of record, and I asked, does any of this stuff need to be upgraded? Are we at a point where we need to start planning out for a failure? And he basically researched it and came back and said, if something on our breaker panel, the main breaker that serves that whole garage, if it breaks, if it goes down, there's literally nothing that's manufactured for it. They would have to start searching the United States, worldwide, looking for a piece that somebody's got on a shelf that came out of a building that got torn down, and may have to do a jumper cable from one circuit to the other just to keep us operating. The type of service that comes into our building is consumers doesn't use that anymore. They've offered to upgrade it and switch it over to their current system at no cost to us because they don't like those even in the system anymore. So if you go back through the last at least 3 budgets, we've had that as one of our top priorities in the capital improvement fund, but there just hasn't been associated funding to pay for that. So it just kind of keeps getting pushed down the road.
So I think the point of tonight's thing is to let council know that we think we've done a fairly good job being proactive in, particularly with the utilities, but also with the roads, on these asset management plans. And we're just trying to kind of close the loop on a couple areas where we haven't been as proactive, and that'll evolve over the next, 12 to 18 months. But then always the question is going to be, where is that going to be funded from? And, we're always trying to leverage and look at other ways to do that.
We've, as Ed said and Jeff said, we've had really good success on our other asset management plans. We've been able to make data-driven decisions, and we just, we realized, and we knew it was there, that we hadn't done the same thing with facilities and parking lots. And, this, by going through this exercise, it kind of pulls back the curtain on our needs. And so we're going to be starting to populate all of those fields on each facility, each parking lot, so then we can use the same data-driven decision-making and make recommendations for council through the budget on what we want to take care of. So I think that would be our last big asset management plan. And then we would have an asset management plan for all of our major operations. So it's just getting off the ground, but we wanted to let you know where we are and how that dovetails into our conversations going forward with our capital improvement plan.
Ed, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How much do we owe between the Ramsell and the Marina building?
I don't know I know what the annual payments are. I don't know what the debt balance is right here setting, but I can certainly get that for you.
Can you get that for me?
Yeah, I mean, the roof has been paid off. That was about $475,000.
We still on
Yeah,
HVAC?
the HVAC has probably got 7 more years on it, so it's roughly half paid for. So we've probably got around $500,000 left. I can get you an exact number.
Okay.
And Marina, I can get you that number as well. I don't know what it is off the top of my head.
5
I
years out.
appreciate that.
What's that?
I thought that and City Hall were about 4 and 5 years out.
Yeah, they are. They have about 4 or 5 years left on them. I just don't recall what the balance is right this second, so.
I don't care about how long it takes to pay it off. I just-
Okay.
And that can be part of the budget discussion also.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the budget every year, but we can highlight that.
All right.
Jeff, what's that board gonna cost down at the garage to replace?
Excuse me?
What's that board gonna cost at the garage to replace?
We've got the estimate from Top Line is about $70,000. It's the service coming into the building, it's the breaker panel, and then some of the distribution to the sub panels.
Any help from consumers for upgrade?
Excuse me?
Any money help from consumers for an upgrade?
I have met with our account representative from Consumers, and we have put that on a list, and so they're looking at if there's any opportunities for us to help reduce that. A lot of their stuff is for energy savings, so we actually applied to the State of Michigan Energy Fund, and I got an email that said that they're gonna approve us to do an energy audit, a grant that would pay for an energy audit. I haven't actually got the paperwork on that yet. But our goal is to, as part of this asset management process, take that energy audit, which would do gas consumption and electricity, go through all of our facilities and identify areas where we've got capital needs, and then once that study is completed, consumers said that they would work as part of that process, but they would also help us identify where we could get rebates or grant money to help implement some of the outcomes of that study.
A little bit more on that grant that, I think $25,000
Yes.
grant for that energy audit. We got that because we were Project Rising Tide community. So just one tangible benefit so far of being a Project Rising Tide community.
As you look at the existing, are you also looking at the new ventures or opportunities for expanding and/or changing what you're doing or the location as you look at the assets that you currently have?
We haven't gone to that degree yet. We just want to capture what we've got and try to get a good handle on that, because right now we're just struggling to maintain what we have, much less take on something new.
On the streets where we have the spike, part of that, I believe, is probably from the sale of city property. And
No, because those funds go straight into the street funds. They don't go through the capital improvement fund.
oh, okay, that's true. Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Anything else?
That's it for me.
That's it?
Other questions?
Unless you have questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on the Downtown Development Authority.
Yeah, this was came out of the DDA's strategic planning session that I attended, as well as the mayor and mayor pro tem. And there was some pretty intense discussions at times. And what we left there with was the fact that the council needed to communicate to the DDA what their expectations were, and the DDA had to be part of that conversation. We had it scheduled for tonight. There was some miscommunication, and DDA wasn't able to attend tonight. But at least we wanted to keep it on the agenda to talk about, you know, what are the expectations that council has for the DDA?
Don't everybody talk at once. Anybody?
Well, I thought you were gonna start talking.
Well, I can.
Okay. Why don't you start, and then
Well, I can start off.
Okay.
I think I'm trying to be diplomatic here. Okay. I've been spending a lot of time reading the current DDA statutes. It's pretty interesting. And what I've learned from reading all of this, that it takes a lot of communication and a lot of cooperation between the DDA and the municipality for it to function correctly. Without that cooperation, we just can't make it. There used to be a lot of things that, well, maybe you had to do, and if you didn't do them, okay. But now they've written a whole lot of rules that say if you don't do certain things, then you don't get your TIF money. So you have to follow certain rules, and you have to make it happen. And without this cooperation, and I feel there's a lack of cooperation between the DDA and this council. We need to work a lot harder to get that cooperation. Just the website requirements alone are going to be very challenging. Everything has to be on the website now. It's all about the Open Meetings Act and the right for the public to know. Every dollar that's spent, every time a motion's made, every meeting, it all has to hit the website, or at the very least has to be put in a book or binder, be downstairs available for public viewing. That is not, well, it'd be nice if we did that. That is, we have to do that. There are some other areas that we need to take a look at. In order to be a board member, you have to be appointed by the municipality. You also, to sit on the board, you have to take an oath of office, and you have to subscribe to that office. There are some areas that we need to look at that we haven't been following, which are state statutes, that we have to bring up to speed. And I'm willing to work towards that.
the compliance portion of PA 57 of 2018 is very explicit. And remember, this is directed not just at our DDA, but at every DDA across Michigan. So the transparency is a big deal, and the reporting is as well. But it's not just accounting for every dollar that they spend. It's also accounting for every dollar that they haven't spent. There are some specific rules relating to if you have a certain amount of funds that you haven't expended in 5 years, you have to explain it. The law is it's pretty strict. And the unfortunate thing is, or not unfortunate, but the DDA is really the city's or the city council's responsibility. We're responsible for making sure that they get it done. So this lack of communication or collaboration becomes an issue, because we need to make sure that if we want to keep a DDA, that we have to keep it up to speed, and it has to be compliant with the law. So if I was making a checklist of things that I expected out of the DDA, one of them is going to be, you have to be absolutely compliant in a whole bunch of areas by the end of this year. So in looking at their website, they have a lot of holes. Their TIF has to be on there. Financial information has to be on there. Meeting minutes have to be recorded on a timely basis. I've waited sometimes 60 days or more to see meeting minutes appear on their website. So, as far as making a checklist, I think it's just making sure that we're doing everything properly is a big deal to me. So that would be my number one. And I don't know how everybody else feels. I wish they had had the advantage of being at this meeting, and there is a report on it, and I think it would be useful for them to see the report.
Well, the consequences of being non-compliant with the current legislation is that you don't get your TIF money. You'll get enough money to pay off your bills, your bond, but you won't get any to do anything else with. And the non-compliance, if you're non-compliant for 2 years, that's what happens. So it's very important that we become compliant with the procedure. The other thing, if I may, is I would like to talk about the Chief Executive Officer.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The Chief Executive Officer has always been interpreted as the mayor, and the mayor will always sit on the DDA board. Well, our government in Manistee is a weak council, a strong city manager. I have had some discussion with the city attorney. I am not the chief executive officer. Mr. Taylor would be the chief executive officer under our form of government. And I would like to see Mr. Taylor appointed to the DDA board. Now, there is another, if for some reason they decide that I am the chief executive officer, under the new policy or the new legislation, I can appoint Mr. Taylor as the DDA board member. So I guess the end result is that Mr. Taylor's going to be the DDA board member.
Thank you.
And I feel that that's an advantage to the city. We, as council members, don't know the day-to-day operation, the funding, all of the things that are needed that we need to know to make really good decisions. He does that on a day-to-day basis. He can better serve our taxpayers in the community. I just feel it's a really good move, and I would like some input from council. What do you think?
I'll chime in. I think it's a great idea. I think, again, the mayor is a year by year elected from the council, and this way you have continuity across. So you're not changing your focus every year with the appointment of the mayor. But one of my concerns for the DDA is the fact that I think they need, like us, we need to focus more on the collaborative efforts. And again, partnerships with the Chamber of Commerce and the Visitors Bureau, and to broaden their views that it's not just what's good for River Street is good for Manistee, it's also the other way around. What's good for Manistee is also good for River Street.
I would have to agree. I think Thad would be better suited in that position. He knows more than us. And yeah, I'm a little disappointed with the communication between us. I think we should have, from our part, we should have confirmed with them with the scheduled work session here. So I think that was a little bit on us and not all on DDA. But we do really need to collaborate, and we need to have some agreement. I know the DDA is kind of still getting their bearings, but we need to be part of that, trying to move forward with the DDA if we decide that.
Well, the way this new legislation's set up, if there's not cooperation, we're wasting our time here. There has to be some cooperation, and we have to work together, or it's not gonna work. Another area that interested me a lot when I was reading the new legislation, this is brand new. The state of Michigan seems to take a different view from the way it has in the past on what economic development really is. It talks about the state condition of unemployment, underemployment, and joblessness determines the state economic growth of the state economy. And through this whole legislation, they're saying that it's okay to buy a building and it's okay to develop that building, but tell me how many jobs you're gonna create. And how many unemployed or underemployed people are you going to put to work or get them fully employed? So a lot of it's changing, and we need to communicate that, and we need to make sure that the new TIF plan includes a lot of that rhetoric, and that they're working on the new TIF plan right now. I think it needs some work yet, but we'll keep working on it. I'm just rambling. Anybody else?
Well, I did reach out to the chairman of the DDA board, Rachel Brooks, because it said in the report that, maybe I shouldn't have shown up on February 13th, but it said in the report that Linda is to provide the DDA with a checklist of expectations that the city council has for the DDA. And I thought that would at least should start with a meeting, so I did email her and told her of my availability. Told her she could have me anytime in March except for the last week, which I will be on vacation. I'm still waiting for a response. So I have reached out, I have tried. So, and I'll continue to try, as we all should. What?
Anybody else?
I agree with you, Mayor. I think that should be on their board too.
And Mr. Taylor, what did you think our next step should be? How do we make this happen?
I think council definitely needs to have a face-to-face discussion with the DDA board. You know, hope that was gonna happen tonight, but it didn't. But we can look at maybe in the May work session, have them come here and have a discussion. Some of the things that I see is that there's gotta be more, the two boards gotta be in sync. It doesn't seem like we're in sync at all.
It's not gonna work unless we are.
Right, and I don't know that the DDA board entirely is working well with the community in general. And just a good example is that it seems to be that the community is going one direction in terms of economic development, and that is, you know, aligning with the chamber and getting good public and private partnerships and working for economic development for the entire community, not just the city. But at the same time, the DDA, at this time, appears intent on hiring their own full-time economic development director, which just seems counterproductive. So I think we have to have that good discussion so our priorities align, we open those lines of communication and make sure everybody's working together. It's a small community, we can't work separately.
I think it would be a good thing if we could get a define what is economic development and what we want between the council, the DDA, the chamber, Rising Tide. I think we're on so many different pages. We need to be focused, like what our vision is.
I agree, and that's one of the targets of Project Rising Tide is, as I say, we have to have a cohesive economic development strategy, and we have to get together and work towards that, because economic development right now is different things to different people, and we got to decide what is economic development and what can we get behind and support. So that is going to be a byproduct of Project Rising Tide.
Have we worked towards, like, I know we can talk and talk, but have we done anything?
We're
to
waiting
get to that point?
we're waiting for our consultant for the economic development. It's going to be kind of an outgrowth of that summit that we had at the Vogue, and he's going to bring back some ideas on how we can do that.
I guess,
Share it with other, like,
Yeah.
I think
Oh,
we
yeah.
could have a work session with all
Yeah,
this.
it's not going to be, and he's worked behind the scenes, and he's had meetings with the DDA, he's had meetings with the chamber, he's had meetings with the city, so he's getting the lay of the land, and then he's going to be making recommendations to help us move forward cooperatively.
okay, Mr. Taylor, my question is, what action do we need to take for you to be on the DDA board? And I would like that to happen sooner than later. There's a lot of decisions being made right now with affects well into our future, years into our future, and they need to be, we need to do the best we can to make the proper decisions.
Is the first meeting in April soon enough?
First meeting in April soon enough.
What about tomorrow?
Yeah,
What about tomorrow? I don't really see what the problem is. I mean,
There's,
we don't need council action, do we?
well, that's what I want to talk with the city attorney, because right now we have an ordinance that we have to take a look at. We also have to take a look at the bylaws.
If
and
I
make
look at
sure.
state law,
Well, I know that, but we have to make sure that those comport with the state law.
okay, but
That's all.
Can you
Yeah.
extend the meeting tomorrow, though?
It's going to be difficult.
Oh,
but if I look at state law, it just says I can appoint you. If you
Right.
consider me the chief executive officer, you're it.
Yeah. I just want to, I want to make sure that we have, because my initial discussions with the city attorney is that because of this new law, we're going to have to look at our ordinance as well as our DDA bylaws to make sure that we have those changed to reflect the statute, and then we can go ahead with that.
I think you understand
I
where
know
I'm
where you're
coming from,
going.
Aaron.
Yep.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you. Anything else? Anybody else? Then we're adjourned.